Thanks for joining me bright and early on day 3. My name's Patrick Pusher. I'm a Senior Solution Architect at Appzero. And today I'm going to walk you through a live application migration from one public cloud to another. That's the case we decided to show you today. Of course, really where you're migrating from and to, according to Appzero, doesn't really matter. We're a very general purpose tool that gets installed alongside the applications you wish to migrate. So there's no hypervisor integration, no cloud API. So really wherever you're running Windows, we're a great fit to help you migrate your applications. So just to set the stage today, we're going to migrate a multi-tier application from a public cloud up to Windows Azure. And we're going to do this live over the internet, so a little bit of unpredictability, but we should be able to finish in the 20-minute slot. It might take about 25 minutes. If we don't finish, we'll conclude at the Appzero booth. We're at 503, right across from Rackspace, but hopefully we can do that. So I've begun just by launching the main Appzero Tether console. This is the tool you use to complete a new migration. We have a separate tool called the administrative console. You can see there on a shortcut on the desktop. That's used for editing of applications that have been migrated. So this is a purpose-built tool for brand new migrations. So I've gone and filled some of this out already, but you can see here that really what we're doing is just giving the migration a name, telling Appzero where to find the source server, either by host name or IP address, the credentials for that machine, and then we're presented with a list of products that we inventoried from that source server. And for us, we're interested in Apache Web Server and a Cold Fusion app server. So we've picked those products here. You can see I've picked the Cold Fusion 10, a few of those, and Apache. So we haven't really kicked off the migration yet. I've just picked what I want to include in this particular migration, and then we're going to go ahead and kick it off. So I'm going to go ahead and just take a look at this Remote Services tab. So I went ahead and picked these 4 applications that I wish to migrate. And then Appzero takes a look at those applications and picks the Windows services that correspond to them. So here I've got a few services that we're going to migrate. So one of the first things you'll want to do is make sure that the services on your source server are stopped. So there's practical reasons why this makes sense. If you're migrating an application and there's data in transit while you do that, you can get pretty unpredictable results. So do this in a maintenance window. The good news is we're doing lots of work to shrink how big that maintenance window has to be. So if you're interested in that discussion, please do reach out after the presentation. We'd love to talk to you about it. So you can see here there's a column that says remote status. And what we're doing is we're querying that server over the internet, trying to determine if those services are running or not. I've gone ahead and already stopped them, so they're stopped. You can stop them if they're running from this interface. You don't have to RDP back into your source server. So if your application has remote accounts associated with it, so think of an application like SQL Server 2005, for example. When you install it, it installs both user accounts and groups. You can pick those here. We'll migrate those for you as well. This particular app doesn't have any user accounts associated with it. It uses built-in NT Authority and local system. So we're going to go ahead and click Begin Tether. And this is really going to build that logical connection between our source and our destination. And again, this is over the internet. Where the source machine lives is a public cloud. In fact, it's on Amazon Web Services. So we're migrating our application from AWS up to Azure today. So now that we've clicked this tether button, we've now compressed our list of services to only the ones we picked. And what we're going to do is we're going to systematically go through these, and we're going to start them. What's really central to the Appzero approach is that as you start a service, what's happening is that we're going to remotely execute that here on the destination server. And as that service starts, whatever it requests in terms of dependencies, we'll copy from the source machine to the destination. So think dependencies are things like DLLs, registry keys, configuration files, and actual app data. Everything that app needs to run. If you've ever used a tool like Process Explorer, very similar. As that app runs, we're just going to get a really fine-grained detail audit trail of what it needs from a dependency perspective, and we're going to bring it over from the source machine to this destination. So as we systematically start up each of these services, you're going to want to watch this little icon down here. This is called our tether monitor. It's going to spin. And as you see it spin, that's one visual indicator that there's an active data copy happening from the source to the destination. The other, of course, is the status of the service. As it's in starting mode, it's copying all those dependencies over. When it moves to start id, it's satisfied. It's ready. It's got the dependencies it needs to run. And in fact, it's running. If you do this over a LAN, each one of these will take about 3 or 4 seconds to start. Because we're working over the public internet, this takes a little bit longer. And this is really the risk point, right, for concluding in 20 minutes. If traffic is slow, quality of service over the internet is never guaranteed. We do have a method for migrating over very slow links. And what that looks like is, for example, you would migrate from, if we're talking about this particular case, you would migrate from AWS to another instance in AWS to really achieve those really quick local LAN-like speeds. And then once you've migrated to that, what we call a staged or intermediate instance, it's very, very trivial to take your application and move it. When you first migrate an application with Appzero, it's in a containerized format. If you're familiar with technologies like AppV and ThinApp, it's similar to that, although not the same. So when you first migrate an app, it's nice and encapsulated. In fact, it can be compressed down into a single file and moved around very, very simply. So that staged or intermediate migration is very useful for very super slow links. I'm going to go ahead and just continue to start these services as we walk through. This is the part that will take the longest of the migration. And then once they're all started, we'll do a quick test of the application just to make sure it functions properly. If you hover over this little tether monitor at any given time, it'll tell you lots of interesting stats around how much data it's moved to date. If you right-click it, you can get live logs, really that speak to all the migration activity that's going on. So once this service is started up, we'll have 3 more to do, and then we'll do a quick test. So as I mentioned, when you first migrate an app, it's in this containerized format, and at that point you have a choice. You can leave it in that format. 2 of the main reasons you might want to do that are application mobility. As I mentioned, it becomes very, very simple to move an app once it's been readied with Appzero. The other is application isolation. So if you've got 2 applications on a server that conflict, maybe they need their own independent Java runtime versions, you can sequester those in this containerized format so that they don't have visibility into each other, and in fact run applications that would otherwise conflict on the same host. If you don't have the need for either that app isolation or the extreme mobility, then you can do what we call a dissolve. And it'll take the application out of that container and install it in a one-way direction to the underlying OS. If you do that, you no longer need Appzero on that server. You can uninstall Appzero. Your application will look just like it's been traditionally installed, although you migrated it from somewhere else, and away you go. That's a real popular option for those that are very concerned with third-party application support. You can imagine if somebody comes in and sees an Appzero layer there, and they're troubleshooting a problem with the application, they may have questions whether it's the Appzero layer or the application itself. So that dissolve really gets rid of that concern. It removes Appzero out of the picture entirely, but still satisfies your migration goals. So we're almost done here. Oh, it's probably in order here. Start these up. It is useful to watch your little tether monitor spin here. Even though your service is started, it may spin for a little bit. So we'll just let it go, and then we'll start our last service. Especially over slow links, you can sometimes have issues where a service will exceed a timeout value that Windows internalizes. So as you pull more and more services over, you're seeding that data into your migration. You're pulling more and more of Cold Fusion over. So we'll just, if a service ever has trouble starting, migrate the other ones around it. A good chance, just by how we sort of choose which data to move and prioritize that, there's a good chance that if you start the services around it, that application data will be there by the time you try to start your last service. So we'll just let this spin for a few more minutes, and then we'll start up our final service and we'll do a test. Our test will really involve open up Internet Explorer, make sure Apache is serving web content to us like we'd expect it to, open up the Cold Fusion administrator page, make sure that works. And we'll look at some of the identity-related questions we often get at Appzero is, when you move an application, let's say that application internalizes a server name or an IP address. We do things as we move the app to make sure that we remediate that. So we'll watch for occurrences of the old server name, and we'll replace it with the new one as we pull that data from the source to the destination. And that really, that's applicable for server names, IP addresses, MAC addresses, really anything you can think of that has to do with identity that you want changed as you migrate the app. So we'll start our last service up, and then we'll do our test. So we just had a release version 5.4 of Appzero about 3 weeks ago, and a couple of new things with it. One is, in fact, this interface. Previously, we'd only had the administrative console, so this is really a streamlined interface that tries to guide you down the path of a migration. So, for example, if you don't stop all the services on the remote host, you won't be able to perform the migration. Whereas previously, you know, it was possible to sort of step on your own toes if you did things out of order. So we've tried to make the interface a little more prescriptive and a little more guided, and you'll see that throughout the whole product suite with version 5.4. So now that it's all started, let's open up our web browser. And if we navigate to this particular URL, we can test our newly migrated Apache and Cold Fusion. So it's really important to exercise the application as you migrate it. Sort of central to the approach is, as you run an app, we watch for dependencies and bring them over. So while you've got your app running, exercise it, walk through some options. What I often recommend you do is take all the shortcuts on your source server where the application lives today and run them on the destination. We call those entry points into your application suite. Make sure you exercise those. It isn't necessary to go in and exercise every drop-down menu in every application, but at least launch the main executables associated with your app. So as this spins, what we're really doing is pulling over more data. You can see that tether monitor is still spinning. So as we request the data, we're pulling it over from the source machine. And when this is ready, what will happen is we'll log into the administrative interface of Cold Fusion, and we'll just do a quick unit test. Certainly in a bigger migration effort, you would likely want a phase there of user acceptance testing where you get a business user who's familiar with the app to come in and just make sure that it's functioning as they expect. Just like you do with any other migration method, really. If we hover over here, we can take a look at how much data we've pulled so far, and it's just about half a gig. So again, once this is done and once we're happy with it, we can open up the administrator console, right-click our VAA, and that stands for Virtual Application Appliance, compress it to a single file, and then really move it anywhere. That becomes super trivial. And in fact, our licensing model encourages that. So how you purchase Appzero is by source server. So whether I have 1 app or 10 apps on this Amazon instance, it's one price. And then once I migrate it, we really don't care how many destinations you're going to roll that out to. Our typical projects, customers want to roll them out to maybe a dev or QA environment, a test environment, and a production environment. That's not 3 migrations according to Appzero. That's really only 1. So you know, that application mobility is very, very central and very important to our customers. So this is really our last step. As soon as this launches, we'll be good to go. So you can see here we've done just over 125 meg in the last couple seconds since we last checked. So we're well on the way. This will open up just about any moment here. Just while we do that, if we open up another tab, so what we're really doing here is testing Cold Fusion and Apache. If we open this up and just navigate to localhost, we'll see that Apache works. Apache's working fine. It's really what we're waiting for is the migration of Cold Fusion to finish. So give it a few more seconds. We talked about everything on the interface. really except for this config on the fly functionality. Although I did speak of it, I didn't call it by name. So config on the fly is that piece that watches the data stream and does the identity replacement in terms of server name, IP address, MAC address, any of those kinds of things. Oh, looks like we've made it a little further here. So we're going to go ahead and log in to the Cold Fusion admin interface. Now, obviously, a test in a real live migration would probably be more exhaustive than this. But if we look at, as soon as this displays, if we look at things like settings summary, we can see that this app now does have the identity of this new server. It's not bringing over old information about where it used to live. It's really conforming to this 2012 instance that we've provisioned in Azure. So you can see that here. We've got Cold Fusion version 10 operating on Windows Server 2012. And away we go. So that's all we have. Hopefully that paints a good picture of what Appzero does and how we can help migrate applications. Again, no media, no current, no past real experience with an application is required. Really just need to be able to pick which applications out of an inventory that we supply you and start your services as you saw me do. So thank you very much. We're at Boot 503. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.